Hi, this video is about the insights of the reading that I did for Authentic Christianity. We're supposed to do a book report, and I selected um, a book that I've been wanting to read for a while. Now, this is an old copy from the library, so it doesn't really have much of a cover. It's The Cost of Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and I have been wanting to read this for quite some time because I do know who Dietrich Bonhoeffer was. He was basically a modern day martyr for Christ during the Nazi regime of Germany during World War II. He was a great theologian, but most of all, he was a very God-fearing man and example to us, and how to he really focused on simplifying Christianity and bring it back to the core of the gospel. And the main aspect or purpose of this book, and with the title, The Cost of Discipleship, is basically he focused most on the difference between cheap grace and costly grace. One thing that um, just really opened up my mind. And a lot of what he wrote about is something or things that most Christians are semi-aware of, um, but he has a profound way of talking about it. Now, he really emphasized, especially in the beginning, and really brought his purpose to the fore, in that the church has sort of downgraded into the idea of cheap grace. And what he means by that is um, kind of like, we know that we have been forgiven, so that's it. There's no really any extra aspect of faith, and there's no change. So this focuses more on uh, just coming to Christ and being atoned for our sins, which is true. We cannot work for our salvation. It is by grace alone. But he kind of toes that line of where where does our part come into play? Is there a part that we have to play? And there is. And so he talks more about costly grace, about what it costs us as Christians to be true followers of Christ, true disciples. It's a process, and it's about more than just getting that ticket to heaven. It's more about getting in line with God's will. And he really focuses much on obedience. Now, going into things that I learned, there are two insights. There's actually quite a few insights. And like I said, a lot of them seem very simplistic on the face value, but when you kind of digest them and mull over them, they have so much more power and kind of blow your mind. In fact, that's one reason why it took me so long to read his book. I at first thought it was more of the difficulty in that it's a translation from German, and so there might be some things lost in translation. But actually, I think the main reason why it took me such a long time to finish it is because of how deep these insights were. So, um, besides the aspects of cheap grace, one thing that he really broke down was um, the idea of let me see here. I want to just check my notes out here. He was talking about the carefree life, which is something that you mostly see in secular books, self-help books on how to like have a better life. I don't really see, at least in my own personal experience, I don't see a lot of books about what it is like to be a carefree Christian. Most of the aspects and ideas of being a Christian seem to focus on how many cares we actually have, how many things we need to focus on, how many um, callings we might have. And one thing that he brought up was about how we just need one eye and a clear eye on Christ, and how everything falls away. All the worldly possessions and worldly needs, all of it kind of falls by the wayside. And there's a gift in focusing solely on Jesus, and everything else just sort of falls into place because obedience is foremost. He really, really emphasizes the obedience part of faith. In fact, he really emphasizes that there's so much disobedience in the modern church that, um, going back to the grace, we're not living in grace and we're not true disciples. But the way that I would apply that is, like I said, it seems so simplistic, but there needs to be a renewed focus of falling in love with Christ in my faith and focusing more on just my relationship with Him. And I cannot do it in my own strength, but asking Him to give me strength and to abide in Him and let go of those distractions. Even my own prayer life and even in my own walk, a lot of times it's easy to be distracted by all the extra things. Oh, what is my lifelong calling? Or how can I become a better wife? How can I become just a better witness? All of that in and of itself can distract from the main mission and almost kind of teeter the scale into more works-oriented faith. And that in and of itself, he says, is disobedience, which is seemingly really harsh, but it's actually something that's essential and incredibly important for us to grasp. Another insight what really spoke into me and was the aspect of obedience before belief. In the beginning of his book, he really starts to talk about how only the man or woman who believes is obedient, and only the man who obeys can believe. Which sounds like it's incredibly hard to work with idea, but after a lot of unpacking this and really a lot of rereading of that passage, one thing, and like I said, going right back to obedience, 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 he uses the image of Matthew and Peter in the Bible about how they didn't essentially make a decision to believe and follow Christ. The belief followed the obedience, and it wasn't an act of their own that they got up and decided, this is what I'm going to do with my life. It was more that Jesus called them, come and follow me, leave your nets, leave your tax collecting vocation, and come with me. And it was that single act of obedience that preceded the belief. And so that kind of goes contrary to what even well-meaning churches, and it's unusual because it feels like the cart is being put in front of the horse, but maybe the cart is the horse this whole time. And one thing that I commonly pray a lot, especially when I'm having troubles in my life, which is almost all the time, this life is a struggle. A lot of times I pray, Lord, I do believe, but help my unbelief. And a lot of times when there's areas of struggle where I'm lacking in obedience, I ask, I kind of make it harder than it really is. One thing that he's just saying is just get out there. Like with Peter being called onto the water, it wasn't until he obeyed and actually stepped out of the boat, and that was when he believed, when he set his foot on that water and walked toward Jesus. But like I said, it's kind of a strange saying and very unusual in Christian literature about how only those who obey can believe, and only those who believe can obey. I'm still trying to digest that and apply that. But if there's anything that just as a whole that I take away from the Cost of Discipleship in this book, and I'm definitely going to renew it so I could read it a little bit more, because there's just so many. The whole book is a nugget of truth, but there are so many little things that are very deep and unusual and different. But the core seems to be about focusing on obedience, and just in all aspects, and everything else follows, even the faith itself. When you obey, the faith follows, and everything else kind of just falls underneath that. So that's what I gathered, and I'm really glad that I chose this book.